Welcome to Venator Chronicles Podcast. I'm Ethan Taylor.
And I'm Dustin Jelly.
Our hope is to inspire new and old hunters alike.
We hope you can join us on this journey of lessons that we have, are, and will learn through the world of hunting. Welcome to episode 2 of Venator Chronicles Podcast.
Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Welcome, Ethan. How you doing?
Pretty good, man. How you doing?
I'm doing better. I'm not sick. I was sick last week.
Were you?
Yeah, dude, I got knocked out with a nasty sinus infection 3 days before having a jiu-jitsu comp. Perfect timing.
Brutal.
Yeah.
Brutal.
So, and we won't talk about the jiu-jitsu comp either.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
We'll leave that to the imagination.
Yeah, we won't talk about how horrible I did. Yeah, flawlessly perfect on my opponent's side.
Yeah, definitely nothing to see on your wife's Facebook page.
No.
Yep.
Do not go check out my wife's Facebook page for the live
make
feed.
it viral, please.
Yep. Oh, man. So, you're doing well? You had a good week?
Yeah, had a pretty good week. Didn't do much as far as hunting goes, but as far as with the family, it was an awesome weekend, awesome week. Work's been going good, so I got no complaints over here.
Good to hear. Yeah.
Very excited about today.
Yes, so am I. I've been looking forward to this episode and hearing some thoughts that you've got.
Yeah, man. Yeah, shoot away.
So we're hoping to cover kind of a recap of 2018 and really look at the good, the bad, and the ugly lessons that we took away from this last year of hunting and everything that comes with it. So with that in mind, I want to begin with you.
Let's do it, man.
Let's do it. So start walking me through this recap of 2018, which we touched upon last episode, was your first year of archery hunting.
Archery hunting, yes. Man, it was... I mean, where do you start? I guess I'll just start when I first got handed a bow. I think I touched on it with Seth, who had kind of passed it along to me.
Who's your brother?
Yep, who's one of my 8 brothers, and then I have one sister. But anyways,
where are you in the line? I always forget.
I'm number 8.
Oh man,
yep.
You're the baby.
I'm the baby, and then they had 2 other mistakes. I'm just kidding. They're lovely individuals.
Yeah.
Yeah, so anyway, Seth hooked me up with his old bow, which shot straight. It was a lot of fun. Got me hooked. Man, I guess I felt like I was getting in the game way late as far as in the year.
Yeah.
Like, it was like drinking water out of a fire hose.
Because what month did you get that bow?
I want to say it was early August, mid-August.
Okay, so yeah.
Yeah. It might have been a little bit earlier, but honestly, it was like... We went out and it was, he's trying to show me how to shoot. We were out there for maybe an hour. Yeah. He showed me how to sight it in. And it was like, I was struggling with like concepts because I'm used to shooting a rifle with a scope.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, so you actually follow the arrow? You don't go the opposite direction? Wait, what's happening?
I know.
And it was like simple, but I had to keep like checking myself.
And had you actually shot a bow before this at all, or just... Maybe you picked up a cheap one as a kid and flung arrows, or nothing.
So there's only one event with a bow that sticks out in my mind before my brother handed me this one. And it was from when I was probably 7 or 8. My mom and dad are probably going to be thrilled to learn more about this. But my brother Ben, he's the one above me. He's the 7th child born. And one of our neighbors, we would get together. It was a recurve, I believe, and we would shoot arrows up into the air.
Yes.
Watch them and literally sprint to see, like whoever was closest to it when it landed won. And I was sprinting, looking up, running at the arrow, and all of a sudden I felt something like hit the crotch of my pants. And lo and behold, I was running, and like as I'm looking up, it just went straight in front of my face, and I ran straight over the arrow, like right in between my legs. So that was my honest to God first experience with the bow. Okay. So probably good that I didn't touch one for a long time after that.
Probably.
Yeah, but we're all safe. Nobody got hurt. So that was my first experience with a bow, and there's really no hunting that happened up until this year. I'd been just rifle hunting.
So rifle hunting, come August, all of a sudden you have a bow. And how long were you shooting it before the addiction started kicking in?
I would say probably within the first 45 minutes of
Okay.
shooting it. So, because it
really
was a little,
quick.
yeah, it was a little clunky at first. And it was like, am I doing this right? Am I doing that right? The draw was probably, you saw it when it was maybe what,
Yeah.
two inches
It was
long?
at
2
least
inches
2
long?
inches too long for you.
And that was after I got what modules they had left.
Oh, geez.
And so I was shooting probably 3-inch long draw length. And so, if there's new people out there, it's pretty elementary to learn about that type of stuff, but I was definitely struggling because of that. And like my body, like I was torquing it and it was just hard to be consistent, but man,
When you're trying to pull that long, it's so hard to hold it on that back wall because the way your body's set up, it sucks.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is I was none the wiser. Like I was having so much fun. Like once I started putting things within like an orange at 20 yards for the first time, I was like, whether I hunt deer or not, this is going to be happening a lot in my lifetime from here on out. I was sold on it basically after that. So it was pretty quick.
Nice.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you really took to it. And then at what point were you like, I think I'm going to hunt. I'm going to try hunting with this.
Well, I think what the funny part is that when we started hearing about, when I started thinking about bow hunting, the idea was, I'll have this longer season. The bow was kind of like an afterthought, honestly.
Okay.
I didn't think it was going to be that big of a deal to me. I was just like, here's my tool. I just need to be proficient with it and I'll go out and I'll do it. I guess I didn't expect really the side effect of being like, archery is something I want to do year round. I want to do, hopefully someday competitions, whatever it is, just to stay in it and to have some competitive edge, whatever that looks like. So to me, it was like, that's a huge deal.
Yeah. Because for me, one of the things that drew me to archery hunting was the fact that you actually had a longer season.
Yes, exactly.
And warm weather.
Yep.
Well,
and it was pretty awesome because my wife was really excited when she heard about it. She's like, hey, they have a longer season, right? Because you got to imagine the 9-day grind. I was sick. I would just push, from dark to dark and come home, not being the husband and the father that I needed to be. And it was all in the pursuit of this animal. And half the time it was like miserable and I didn't really enjoy what I was doing at times. But I was just thinking, you got to put in the work. And so to see her optimistic about what that might mean for our family was pretty cool.
Yeah.
So yeah,
nice.
It seemed to fit really well with kind of the direction we wanted to head with it.
Good.
Yeah.
So since you had just obviously never bow hunted before, and all of a sudden this new season opens up to you, what was that like?
There's a lot more to it than just being, you have early season now and you have mid-season and rut, pre-rut, rut, post-rut, second rut, if you're into that kind of thing. It was like I could hunt in town. I could hunt, close to home. I could hunt these areas where it's like, I've seen deer here. I know I can go here. And then also it was pretty overwhelming because I was thinking there is so many places that I need to check out and there's no time for me to go and scout. And really my brother Seth was just a huge mentor in it because he referred me to Onyx, which it's been a huge
lifesaver.
Huge lifesaver. I've definitely found pockets of time to do some e-scouting. And in fact, that's led me to quite a bit of success, or in my mind, success as far as like finding activity based on terrain and just some land features. So there's a lot of e-scouting. And then every minute I could get outside, I was out. It was probably light at 4 a.m. I usually start work at 6. Okay. And so I'd go out and I'd walk, I'd check these little areas. And because it was closer to town, that's something I could actually do. And then when I could go out and, if I say I had the afternoon, I would just go out and look for sign. And it was actually pretty discouraging because it's like all green, overgrowth, and it was really hard to find anything.
Yeah.
And every time I went out, and I remember just marking this spot way back in what I thought was the middle of nowhere. Walking within 100 yards of that spot, there's a trail cam. There's a tree stand chained to a tree. The dude's totally cheating. All right, called him out, but I didn't take any of his stuff. I waved at his little camera, but there's massive buck rub. that his camera's pointing at. And I'm like, oh man. And it was just gorgeous, this area. And so, it's like I just spent a whole afternoon. I learned a bit about the terrain and just the land features and what it meant and how the deer were moving in that. But ultimately I was like, oh, I can't hunt here. I'm not going to hunt here. I'm not
because somebody else was already there.
Yeah, exactly. And the DNR doesn't really do anything with stands. They're like, yeah, we get calls about like hundreds of those. There's really nothing you can do. And I'm like, well, I'm not going to take them, so I'll just move along. So I guess another really big thing that kind of at least pointed me in the right direction was both talking with my brother Seth, and then I started watching the Hunting Public. And if you guys don't watch them or their seasons and their tactics, I just can't say enough about it.
Yeah, you need to head over to their channel.
Yeah.
You'll give them a follow on YouTube, on Instagram, and start
Facebook,
watching what they have.
Like, because that was between talking to Seth, which his time is limited, and watching those videos, and most of their videos, like anybody else, are failures. But what was really cool is that they had a pretty aggressive tactic. So it wasn't food sources that they were hunting beds. And so I was just kind of trying to figure out the terrain, where these beds were, and starting to learn to decipher that stuff. But to me, it felt like so much information coming in at once.
So at what point did you finally get out and start hunting and put into practice what you were trying to learn?
Okay, so there was I think I found probably 2 or 3 places.
And everything that all these areas you were kind of looking at, and they're all within 3 to 5 to 10 miles from your place, kind of.
Yeah, most of the areas that I was frequenting the most would be probably within 10 miles of where I live, which is a huge deal. And I found one spot that I really liked. I mean, I would go out there and just glass towards the evening with my kids, or we'd go out and set up trail cameras, and we'd go out there. And one time we saw a bobcat, we saw turkeys, we saw geese, we saw ducks, and we had deer walk almost within 70 yards of us. We just like sat on the ground as soon as we saw them. And so that was an area I was really excited to be in. But really what happened for me is the season came up quicker than I could scout. And so what became, my best to try to nail down where I was going to hunt or identify where bucks were, it just became, put your stand on your back. You're going to make it a scouting trip, and you're going to hang your stand, an hour or 2 before dark, and you're going to see what happens. And my strategy was like, where's the best odds I can come up with, but at the same time, just get observation sits and just try to see what's going on and try to just get within the vicinity of these animals. Because I had a doe tag and a buck tag, and so I was just excited to be out there and sitting with a bow and watching deer come up within range that I've just hadn't experienced that yet.
Okay.
Besides, even in the rifle season, it was like 100 yards plus almost all the time. So, yeah, my strategy was, honestly, most of it was put the stand on your back and walk out to where you think they're going to be and make a decision when you get out there. And ultimately that strategy paid off. It did end up with the buck, with the buck, because it's the only buck with the bow. So we're going to call it the buck tonight.
The buck.
Yeah. So,
I mean, I can't imagine by this point there was too many ugly lessons, but
actually, I kind of jumped around a few of the lessons leading up even to this part of it. By this time, I had actually changed bows. I had decided that this is worthwhile. This is going to be something I'm going to be doing the rest of my life, and it did give me a chance to. One of the good things for me was like I could interact with nature. It was revitalizing for me, and the struggle, I think, and the ugly and the bad would have been not letting the failures demotivate you when you're getting out there and start to take away from those hunts the things that even when you don't succeed really are worthwhile. Mm-hmm. So I had actually missed a couple deer by this time. I'd missed a couple does. And really the good lesson I was learning, though, is that when you take the time and you walk back there and you go where you think nobody else wants to go, and a lot of the time it's just crossing water. Like I had water up to my knees, like I'm just soaked, but it's early enough in the season. I'm still warm. But as I'm working my way out to ultimately where I found the buck, there were so many things being reaffirmed in my mind of like the terrain tells you this. There's a high likelihood of that actually playing out the way you think it's going to. Mm-hmm. The time of year, the general patterns of what they're going to be doing, where buck bedding should be. And so as I was, early on my way out to this spot where the buck was, I was in my mind, I'm going, dude, is this worth it? Because it was just nasty terrain.
As you're learning all this and learning to read the terrain and animal habitat, at what point did you feel like it started to click? Or at least like that beginning, like, oh, hey, I'm recognizing this. Oh, I see this. Oh, hey, look at that.
Yeah. So it really, the spots before this spot that was really deep, before this spot was pretty easy access. I mean, it was like a mile walk, but it was this public road that just, you could tell people went back there for stuff, but it didn't seem super high pressured didn't seem like it was under a lot of pressure as far as hunting goes, especially early season. And so that for me was like, it was something I could just bring my family out to. It was something that I could easily access. I would see a lot of does out there. I got like one buck on trail cam, maybe a fork actually, as well as a 7-pointer. And I'd see turkeys out there. I had a turkey tag. And so there was this really easy spot where it was just, and it was the typical like, hey, this is where they feed.
Yeah.
So for me, this was like one of the first times where I was really applying and then putting all my eggs in that basket for one of my hunts. Because with a family, every hunt is so valuable. You're going, I'm choosing to be away from my family. Like I hope this is worthwhile.
Yeah.
So this hunt really started to teach me that it was worth it when I got back there, and it was like, oh, this was worth my time. Ultimately, I ended up seeing 4 bucks just on this one outing, and I was like ecstatic. And then that to me was right after that was like, man, I want a community to be amped up with. I don't even know if you and I were talking at this point or not, because I called probably 3 or 4 people on the way home just to talk about the hunt. So I will say,
I think this was a little before we started really connecting.
Yeah. And so I will say, so on my way out there, I busted a pretty big buck. I could see its rack was outside of its ears. It was early on in the day, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to just keep going. I'm not that far from where I ultimately want to check out. I got back there, ended up getting like 10, 15 yards into some pretty heavy brush, and I looked around a little bit. It was like Papa Whips just bent over and nasty, twisted stuff. And I was trying to get my stand through on my back with my backpack, and I'm like, this is just brutal. And I just paused.
Like Sasquatch.
Right.
Boom, boom,
yeah, exactly.
boom.
I'm like, I'm so loud. But I paused for a second. I took a second to observe what was going on around me. And I was like, oh, there's a bed. Well, there's a bed. There's a bed. Like, I'm just standing in this bedding area. And with how many beds there, I was like, oh, these must be does. But a little closer observation, I was like, oh, buck rub. I probably saw like 15 within 25 yards. And I was like, my goodness.
And that is so exciting as someone that that hasn't really experienced that. And when you come across that, you're just like, this is awesome.
Yes. And so there's a little valley to my right. And there was basically I was walking on it was right at the end of this ridge line that these beds were at. And I was like, based on kind of the hunting strategies I learned from Seth and also the hunting public, I'm like, I'm hunting these beds. And I was like in a pretty high risk spot, but I was like, the wind is right. And I shimmied up a tree, maybe 40 yards off of their beds. And I shimmied up it. An hour and a half later, I had a 4-pointer come in. And it was like the loudest I've ever heard a deer, because it was so unaware and so like there was nothing out there to disturb it. It didn't seem like it had anything to care about.
Typical teenager.
Right. Well, and the other side of it though too is during rifle season, after that opening morning, it's like deer are on high alert.
Oh yeah.
High alert.
Yeah.
And so this is the first time, and I'm within 30 yards of this thing, 35 yards or so, and I'm looking at this deer and I'm like, it was like this super overwhelming experience of like, I don't have to kill you. at this moment. Like ultimately I kind of predetermined that I will shoot a buck that is worth it to me to be done hunting for the year. So whatever that looked like, whether it was a 6-pointer or an 8-pointer, maybe I played everything right and it happened to be a 6-pointer that was there. You know, if you're grunting in a deer, it feels a little more valuable taking that. And so I was really just playing it hunt to hunt as far as what I was going to take. Okay. Because I had some 4-pointers within 5 yards of me walking right under my stand. I was only 8 feet off the ground, and I just observed them because I was like, it just doesn't feel like I don't want to end my season quite yet.
Okay.
Because I just felt like I was learning a lot. So anyway, this I think it was 4-pointer that came in, and then this 6-pointer was coming in, and you know I didn't know it was what it was quite yet, but it was coming in. I see the tops of the trees just shaking on its way in, and I'm like, oh my goodness, this is so cool. And you just felt like you were in their home. And so this is where we get into a little bit of what I would say the bad and the ugly. So it comes out, it looks like a 6-pointer, and I'm like, you know, I'm not going to take the shot. I'm just going to watch these two dudes hang out, and they were probably within a couple yards of each other. I think I had them ranged at like 30 yards.
Okay.
And I was just watching, and I pull up my binoculars, and I'm looking at this thing a lot closer now, and it turns its head, and for whatever reasons, I didn't notice how tall the tines were, and also like the brow tines, and I'm like, oh, that's an 8-pointer, and all of a sudden, like my insides, I just got excited, and I was like, this is cool.
You fell in love.
Yeah, I fell in love, and so, man, if you can be called fortunate for missing deer, I'm fortunate. Because I had clean missed deer, I think 2 times up to this point.
With rifle hunting or with your bow?
With my bow this year. So I missed a couple does. Okay. And there's a variety of reasons for that. But he was quartering away. I had him at like 32 yards, I think. And I think I can attribute it to just a lack of practice from an elevated position. Not really hinging yourself at the hips, and I was moving my front arm instead of moving at the waist, and I just. And
did you have a rangefinder?
I did, yes.
Okay.
At this time I did get one. I found out very quickly that was absolutely pretty crucial for an archer.
Yep.
And so, I draw back, and there's a tree that's like right at the front of his hind quarter. You know, it's like 6-8 inches wide. And he's quartering away, and so he's not just like perfectly sideways. He's not perfectly broadside, rather. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to try to put it behind his last rib and try to come out, through the vitals.
Yeah.
So I draw back, and I'm looking down. I do everything what I think is right.
Yep.
And I let the arrow fly. The deer takes off like maybe 10, 15 yards, both of them. They stop. They look at me, and I'm like, what's going on? I don't see any blood. The deer's not continuing to run. I'm like, maybe it's woozy because I must have smoked it.
And how confident were you that you had hit it?
I was honestly like 75, 85% sure.
Okay.
I had hit it.
Oh.
Yeah. Like, it was not, part of the podcast is like looking back and be like, yeah, it's a little embarrassing, right? And so I'm okay with that. But like, I remember feeling like, oh my goodness, is this it? Did I actually get one? Mm-hmm. Are you kidding me? This is, and so I started to get all amped up but I just watched the deer walk away. And as it's like each step it takes away, like every step it took away was like an inch my heart dropped in my guts. And I was like, oh, it seems like it's okay. And so I'm sitting in the stand, and I text my brother. I'm like, so how long should I wait in the stand before I go see if an arrow has blood on it? And I just got crap for service out there. And he's like, well, I'll give it 30 minutes. And I'm like, but I hear a deer to my right. He's like, dude, this is, okay. So this is another newbie thing, which I would call bad.
Okay.
I'm sitting in the stand. I'd been hearing a deer to my right, which is where the big buck was. And there's a hint of doubt that I hit this deer, and I'm searching I didn't have a lighted knock. So I'm searching for my arrow on the ground with my 12x50s.
Yep.
And, I'm not seeing the arrow, but I'm like, the deer looked totally fine. I've been listening to this deer to my right for so long, and it's still working its way right in. And my brother, I text him, I'm like, but should I get down? I hear a deer to my right. He's like, dude, you let an arrow go, you're done hunting.
Oh.
until you go and see if that arrow
bomb.
is. Yeah, exactly. And I'm like, oh, and like as soon as he said, it, I was like, yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so it was one of those things where, you know, and also, I mean, if I'm honest, part of me was like, I wonder if it's a big buck. You know, and I'm glad that I didn't have to face the situation. I'd like to think I would have done the correct thing and not air. You know, I would have erred on the side of caution opposed to the other. But I went down from the stand, went over, looked for 15 minutes, didn't see any blood, couldn't find my arrow, and so I'm like, maybe it's in it, maybe there's not blood.
Dude, that sucks,
right? And I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm looking, I'm texting my brother. And I'm like, dude, can you come help me look for this arrow? It's going to be dark in like an hour. And so I'm walking around. Finally, I see the arrow. I pick up the arrow. It is full of mud. And that is it.
That's it.
I try to sniff it. Nothing. I look for hair in the area. And this is where the community, I think, came in, because it was like an overwhelming sense of failure.
Yeah.
But then also when I started talking to the people that really cared and understood what it's like to miss a deer. And, you know, for me, like, I go out there and it's like, I'm here to execute and get the job done. And I expect perfection out of myself rather. And when I started talking to those guys, it was like, they really helped me understand the successes that were happening, and also how blessed I was that it was a clean miss.
Nice.
Because you can spend 2-3 days looking for a deer, you know,
and
you should, if you end up hitting it, you know what I mean? And so that's where the community came in and picked me right back up, because it was like, oh yeah, I found this area where all these deer are. And then I missed the deer, and now I did waste my time, but it's like, nope. When I started talking to those guys, it was like, this is an important lesson. Take all you can from it. And then I started learning about bending at the hip instead of the arm moving. And so there's tons of good, like tons of it.
Sorry, I was just kind of curious. Do you think, after looking back, and do you think that you shot high, you shot low?
That's a really good question. So in talking with more experienced shooters, they think, and I tend to agree, and this is what was really interesting, is with every arrow that I loosed at an animal, they would ask me, like, what do you remember about this? What do you remember about this? Were you anchored here? You know, did you move your front arm? And it was like, oh, I don't remember that at all. And it's like, okay, that's something to work on. Mm-hmm. And so as we were talking through this scenario of what happened, there was a few key things that I didn't remember, and that one was an anchor point being in place.
Okay.
Which could be me dropping my front arm, you know, because
and did you have your new bow at this point, or did you have the old bow?
It would have been the old bow.
Okay.
Yeah. So too long of a draw.
Yeah.
Right. And then also it was the first time I'd heard the words about like bend at the waist. And so I was like, yeah, I know for sure I didn't do that. And so, excuse me. And so we started kind of unraveling this thing. And also another experienced shooter was mentioning that when you see an object, I had mentioned that tree there was a tree kind of at the hind quarter of this deer.
Yeah.
It was quartering away from me. Tried to put in that last rib. And he had mentioned, like, when you're shooting 3D targets and there's an object in the way, you end up almost subconsciously pulling further away from that object.
Okay.
And so based on where my arrow went, because there's kind of a real narrow window where my arrow could go without hitting this animal.
Yeah.
And the trajectory and what I could see where it landed and all that stuff, what I could deduce, and after our conversation, was I shot actually far right of it, not high or low. I mean, it might have been a little high, a little low, but generally speaking, it was further right than it should have been.
Okay.
And so kind of subconsciously avoiding that tree, because that was a major thing in my mind when we were talking about it. I was like, yeah, I really didn't want to hit the tree, but I was trying to hit that last rib, and those were pretty close to each other.
Interesting. See, that's almost the exact opposite of a situation I had, which I'll just share it now. I had a deer in this one area come in, a doe, and she came walking in. I'm trying to remember the yardage. It's probably about 25, 30, and she ended up walking out, and then again, very similar to yours, that the hindquarters were covered up by a tree.
Yep.
And I ended up shooting, and I totally smoked the tree. And
That's a
then
good
I had
tree,
to
though.
let it knock, and I saw that thing ping pong off other trees like crazy.
Oh.
Yeah, but I was so focused. I think my problem was I was so focused on that tree
Yeah.
that, and there's a lot of other performance issues going on there, that I was so focused on that tree that I was drawn into the tree rather than, in your case, drawn away from that tree.
Yeah.
Trying to avoid it. And
Well,
so,
and I mean, how many times are you at the archery range or at your home, whatever it is, where you just have a square target, maybe even a 3D target, and there's no objects.
There's no
it's
objects.
Just nice 20 flat.
there's no pressure either.
Right, and you're just standing on the ground. It's just 20 yards away, and you're just letting them fly, and you're like, man, I feel good about this.
Yep.
And after that, it's like, okay, I need to seriously start really considering what I'm doing and the consequences of letting an arrow go at an animal, and what that could mean, and my responsibility in trying to make the quickest, most ethical kill that I can deliver.
Well, so let me ask. So when you were with that scenario, what do you think your mindset was focused on? Was it focused on more, okay, this is what I need to do. Here's the process I need to complete to be able to execute this kill? Or were you so focused on that outcome? Like, I'm going to put an arrow and I'm going to kill that deer. Like, were more focused on the performance and the execution of what needed to take place, or I see deer, I need to kill deer? And we're so focused on killing that deer.
Yeah, so that's a really good question. I think when I'm looking back at it, when you talk about taking information in and feeling like you're drinking water out of a fire hose, which I'll probably say 15 more times through this, because it's just what it felt like. To be honest, everything was a large idea still. I wasn't fine-tuned. I didn't have a process. I didn't have a solid strategy. It was like, okay, what's the big idea? And then let's enact that. And then once that's enacted and I'm out there, boots on the ground, I'm going to tweak it to what I think is right in the moment, because all the advice in the world won't put me 40 yards from those beds, because they don't know that those beds are there, and I need to make that decision for myself, right? Yeah. And so it was like, here's the big idea. I want to get a deer that I'm excited about, excited enough that I'm willing to end my season in September. And when I saw this deer, it was like, okay, I'm excited. I'm good. I don't get shaky before the shot. After the shot, I'll start to get a little, like, if I'm sure I hit it, I get shaky, as I found out later. But I missed this deer, and it was just a mental battle. From I just want to jump out of the tree and go look, right? And I sat there, and it was just rolling around in my head. What was okay, so what's next? So honestly, I think a lot of it was here's the things that were in my mind. Okay, can I shoot 20 to 30 yards pretty consistently on my own estimation? Yes. Okay, check. And then, okay, where roughly is the terrain that I can find deer and bucks in particular? Okay, check. I found those things. Now, where the whole honing a craft comes in is, okay, I thought I shot 20 to 30 yards consistently, but now here's all these circumstances and all these issues that I would never take into account outside of my experience and being able to maybe even sitting down with someone and just working through all these things. But a lot of it is just, you have to spend the time out there, and you have to experience a lot of those failures. And so it was through those failures that I started to go, okay, so this isn't going to work. What I currently have right now is not working. So where can I go to find what's next? And so when I started engaging with my community, the little community I have, it's like, oh, okay, these are ideas I've never heard of. Bending at the waist, that makes sense. As soon as you say it, I'm in my head, I'm going, duh. But also, how would I know, right? Yeah. And so without the community, what do I go online and look up? I missed a deer. Why? You have to have a community to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And so to me, it was, I got this big idea and try to work through the big idea and have some success, as far as finding the right area. and then I miss. Okay, so now I need to work on the the foundation of my archery skills and understanding how big of a deal it is when you screw up. And thankfully, it was clean miss, but yeah, I felt pretty down. And the community around me that really cares and engages in the archery world, they really lifted me up. And then the outcome-based people, which I think is normal for people who don't hunt.
Oh, yeah.
I think that's totally natural to be like, did you get a deer?
Yeah, it's the human. I think it's the way we're hardwired. Because in reality, that's part of, we're obviously trying to create a certain outcome.
Right. And I don't expect everybody to care about the nuances of why I missed a deer. All they hear is I missed a deer. Yeah. And that's all the information they need. And that's all they care to hear. And that's all I care to share if that's where they're at. And that's okay. And so I had to deal with the backlash is so the wrong word. I had to deal with people just asking how it went. And it was really hard just to be like, you know what, you just got to own the mistakes. And you can't explain it away because they don't care about the nuances necessarily, or just don't get them, and that's fine. But then really leaning on the community side of it to be like, this is a win for me overall. It was a huge learning experience, and ultimately that's where I came back and killed the buck I had missed.
Yeah, and I think it was right around. It was close to that time. It was sometime in October. For some reason, you and I reconnected again. I don't even remember how or why we started talking about bow hunting.
I think if I remember correctly, it was you saw me post a picture with a bow or something about bow hunting, and you were obviously pretty deep into the technical side of it. And so, I mean, as soon as we started talking,
yeah, that's right. Because I think it had something to do with like getting together and shooting and helping you figure something out.
Yeah. And so it was a big part of it was we were coming together around archery.
Yep.
Which you started to really give me an idea of what's going on as far as hands-on learning.
Yep.
And then, you know, when I got my new bow, obviously you and I connected again.
You started talking quite a bit, a lot of questions.
Oh, man, yeah. It was exciting times.
Yeah.
Exciting
and
times.
I was just excited that there was somebody else that was as excited as I was about this whole aspect.
Well, and that's the thing, again. And you had mentioned, like, what you had, and so I'm going to kind of bounce one off of you here. So with you've been doing this was this your third year?
Yeah, this is my third year.
Okay. And the painful truth, we haven't harvested a deer yet.
Yeah,
for you at this point.
Yeah, I didn't harvest a deer yet either.
How difficult outside of community is that to continue on?
It was really difficult going into year 3.
And I know you work hard.
Yeah.
And so it's not like you're half butting it. Yeah.
You
know, I know you are going after it. And even with like your archery stuff, I knew it was like, oh, he's all in on this stuff.
Yeah.
And so for me to like be like, oh, he hasn't gotten a deer yet. Okay. That's got to be tough. That's got to be really tough.
Yeah, and it definitely is tough, and I think you hit on a really important piece there with that community aspect that you and I really started to really bond over. Was that this insatiable drive to refine what we were doing? Mm-hmm. I mean, despite being so new at it, so green. I mean, we wanted to become good, not just. Okay, being able to, put 3 arrows in a pie plate at 20, 30 yards, but being able to just really accurately be able to deliver that arrow, that killing system into whatever range we felt ethically able to and really well. And so to be able to come across somebody else who was like, okay, I really want to learn how to do this well. Yeah, was huge, was so helpful for me, and so many of the failures that I experienced, like you were the guy that I had no problem texting because it'd be like, man, this happened, this really sucked, and it wasn't a follow up question of, oh, well, that really sucks, you'll get him next time. It was, well, why do you think that happened? It was those hard but needed questions. Of, well, why? Like
I have an ugly question for you.
Shoot.
Okay, so When you were going through these 3 years, and it's not like you didn't see a deer.
Yep.
How well, as far as I'm going to say ethics, but in particular, the range you were willing to shoot.
Yep.
Do you feel like that was exactly the same? Did you feel temptation to start reaching outside of that? Where were you at, and how did that? I mean, did you feel it evolve? I mean, if we're, because even for me, after a couple misses, I was like, okay, I'm not hitting within this range, but then it made me want to get one even more.
Yep.
And so I had to really check myself a few times.
Yeah, that's a deep question. I think so. The first 2 years, I didn't really have a ton of opportunities. I had a couple opportunities when I went up north to Lake of the Woods that I didn't even get a shot off. My first weekend ever bow hunting, I had a doe come walking in right under me, and she stayed within 30 yards. And she was a nice sized doe. She had a couple yearlings with her, and it was opening weekend, so I'm like, I'm not shooting this. In hindsight, I wish I totally would have taken her, just because those yearlings were plenty old, and she presented a lot of good shots, and I wish I would have taken that opportunity just to harvest that first deer, have that experience of it all.
If I can I interject 1 second?
Right.
I think one thing with with those yearlings, people I heard multiple comments about some of the does. I shot at a couple does, and they all had yearlings with them.
Okay.
The DNR knows what they're doing when it comes to setting the season timing, and it's like they are totally self-sufficient.
They're totally.
Yeah, so it's like no quarrel there.
Yeah, so it was one of those. It was like opening weekend, and being so new to hunting. I mean, that was year one. I wasn't sure what it all looked like, and I was waiting for a buck. And the following year, I had an opportunity that I didn't take. So I didn't actually gotten a shot off.
Okay.
On a deer. So
and that's year one.
That was year one. Year two, didn't even get a shot off.
And how many deer do you think you saw within 100 yards?
Not a lot.
Okay.
Maybe 5.
Okay.
But I mean, you kind of keep in mind my first couple of years. Most of the time getting out was my trip up north. I tried hitting an area by my house that wasn't successful at all, just due to the topography and the timing of it all, and my lack of understanding of where to be and where to look. So I really didn't have a ton of opportunities. So I was comfortable at that point. Year one's probably 30 yards. Year two maybe 40. Probably really 30. I don't really remember where I felt comfortable. But year three going into, I'd really practiced a ton. I was shooting out to 80, 100 pretty consistently.
Sure.
To where 50 with the right circumstance. I mean, we're talking no wind, perfectly broadside, standstill deer. I had no problem going to 50.
Okay. Like hold on now. Like chip shot feeling?
No, I felt like
it was
confident, very confident.
It was still a challenge, but it was, like you're saying, circumstantial.
But circumstantial was and more so 50 was, I felt really confident. I mean, I was shooting 70 pounds, so with a 29.5-inch draw, and with an arrow that's got plenty of speed. I never doubted the equipment. I knew enough, with deer at that range, that had plenty of ability to kill it. Yeah. As long as, like I said, no wind, perfectly broadside, I knew I'd be able to put it right in where it needed to be, especially from a tree stand. I felt very confident just shooting at a target out to 70. 70 was no problem. When I started to get to 80, that's where I noticed, each year, my first year was 50. I got up to 50, mentally started breaking down. Year two, 60, started mentally breaking down, or 75 or so. Yeah. Year three, it was 80, 85 plus. That's where I started to, and towards the end of the summer, 80 became decent, and 90, 100 was really we're starting to mentally break down. But 50, I knew no problem. Even when tuning my bow, I tuned my broadheads out to 60, and just was able to deliver. I knew
Yeah.
that the system was good without a doubt. So, to answer your question, it kind of changed over the years.
Okay.
But so, I mean, anything under 50,
Yeah.
I felt really good about.
Okay.
Like,
So what do you think about, because I've heard people say with, I mean, in particular with firearms, and I think that's just more typical. I mean, it's the majority compared to archery. They say things like, if you have any doubt when you pull the trigger, you shouldn't pull the trigger. Which, with a rifle, I tend to agree with somewhat. But having missed some deer, if I wasn't willing to like if I was like, oh, there's doubt, I can't lose this arrow, I don't think I would have let an arrow go after the first miss or maybe the second miss. In that case, outside of it being like 10 or 15 yards from me. Which could arguably be a good way to gauge it. I don't know. What do you think about the people who might think that, where it's like, well, if you have any doubt in your mind, you shouldn't take the shot because you're doing like a disservice to ethics and whatever that might be. What do you do with that when you do have doubt?
Well, I know for me to kind of speak on this, as 2018 went on, my confidence started to go down because I did have a couple misses. I started developing really bad, especially late season 18. Started to develop really bad trigger panic.
Is that different from target panic?
Or target panic. Sorry,
okay, no, that's okay. Can you give a brief description of that? Because I'm still not even familiar with some of this stuff.
So target panic, from my experience, and it seems to be what everybody describes it as, is this. So what happens is you're shooting a bow, draw back, and the most common form of target panic is as soon as that pin hits the center of the bullseye, your body wants to just fire off that release at that moment.
Oh, that's not normal?
Just and I've battled that quite a bit actually, and throughout my shooting career, and having to get in that later of how I've learned to overcome that and deal with it when it does start to happen. But I started really developing that with my thumb release, whereas boom, I'd get on that bullseye, bam, I'd want to get off that shot, versus what I have to tell myself is trust the process. And so that really started to creep in on, and honestly, like I can get into the specifics later, but I started to even notice a difference in my shooting while hunting from the beginning of the season. That first shot I took in an animal to the last shot.
Really? Not mentally or like physically?
Physically.
Okay.
Mentally, I felt confident, but my execution of the process was starting to, it was sloppy. It started to really degrade. And so that's where I really kind of, one of my big takeaways, the bad that I recognize that hopefully I can address for next year, and I would encourage everybody, is to continue to practice, to get out and practice the process, to practice those reps, those good, nice, clean reps, to continue to build that, because I didn't get as much practice in season as I did preseason and throughout the year. Because I mean, I shoot all year round. Whether that's in my basement, or going out to the yard, or the shooting range. Like I'm practicing all year round, and I noticed I really didn't practice a ton in season, especially late. Once the snow came, really started to practice less and less and less, and I saw that degradation of skill really take place.
Well, and I think too, I think I'm a good example of, I mean, you have to balance, like for me, again, it's every time I get the opportunity to go out, it's like during hunting season, it's like I'm hunting, it's like practice, shooting my bow at a target is not a high priority.
And can you can't even shoot in town, can you?
Yeah, well, when you miss a couple deer, you kind of stretch the limits there. I may or may not.
As far as practice.
So this is, after I missed a few deer, a couple deer, I had a solid backdrop, pun intended. But it went from, I put the archery bag. Actually, I was borrowing one because I just didn't have the equipment. So I borrowed a target. I put that in my driveway starting at 9 p.m. So it's dark out. Put that in my driveway, turned on a floodlight, went all the way back to my fence, and there's a house about 10 feet behind me. Again, I did have a good backdrop, but my sight had a little LED light on it. So I'm looking through my peep sight in the dark. I can definitely see all my pins illuminated, and I'm like doing all I can to squeeze in reps outside of actually hunting.
Okay.
And this is again with the other bow, draw length too long, all those things, and the consistency was just trash.
Yeah.
But it was, the mentality was like, I need to do something. And, you know, it being my first year and learning about missing a deer and then trying to really take the lessons from that. I think at any point in your hunting, we'll say career, I think we shouldn't let that get off our radar. Kind of to your point is you can't practice enough.
Yeah.
And I guess the question I have to ask myself, or anybody listening would have to ask themselves, is at what would it take for you to actually prioritize that?
Yep.
Because it's really hard.
Yep.
And I know firsthand that it's really hard. And so for me, since it was my first year, I had a pretty good, easy excuse of being like, oh, well, I just haven't shot. I need to do this. Like, it's a necessity.
Yep.
But I think you might be able to apply that to most archery hunters. Mm-hmm. I mean, you even see guys like John Dudley, who's like, as soon as the season's over, oh, we got to start a camp, basically, because we have all lost our touch.
Yep.
What if? What if?
When
if
a
everybody,
guy like Dudley says he can see a degradation in his skills, which in all reality, his degradation, his lowest point of shooting will probably be my best shooting ever.
Yeah, ever. And that's a hopeful ever.
Yeah.
And that's not to put you down. It's to just display how good he is. And so why isn't that something that we think is a bigger deal?
Yep.
I mean,
and I think that really brings up a big, point of the ethics of hunting and of shooting and of archery shooting, especially because the skill set archery demands you to have is honestly way higher than rifle. Having shot rifle for years, it was far easier to learn how to shoot long distance with the rifle than it has been with a bow. And I am definitely a firm believer. And honestly, I don't think I'm not even at a level where I would like to be, as far as the amount of practice time in, but I'm definitely a firm believer in getting out and practicing year round, whether that's at least once a week, or 2-3 times a month, getting to the range and just keeping up and developing that skill set and at the very least learning your equipment that you have. Yeah. That it really bugs me being so new and seeing so many people I know. Yeah. 1 week, 2 weeks, maybe a month
before the season,
getting out taking a bow. But most of the people I know, it's a week or two before season. Oh, I should probably take out my bow. And even in rifle, it's I'm going to take my rifle out and see if it's sighted in. Yeah. But especially with the bow, it's like, man, I really feel like the ethical side demands a higher amount of time be spent in it. And like for me personally, I'm out that at no later than 2 weeks. That last month though, I'm out there shooting every day, whether that might be 3 to 5 arrows. Yeah. Boom. Just getting in good quality, focused reps. Yeah. But I'm getting in those reps every single day.
Well, and those cold reps are a huge deal.
First
just
shot.
like coming out first shot.
Where am I at with that first shot? Like that was one thing I heard a couple of years ago. Was like, I test myself first shot where I'm at, and that was huge. Yeah. Like,
and that's really because I know for me, like when it took me 10, 15 arrows to warm up, so to speak, and it was like, oh well, that's a problem when you go out into the stand and you have one arrow to make the right shot. And so I was, that first shot is kind of a big deal.
Yep.
And there's not a warm up. And as you get later in the season, you literally can't warm up, and you have to try to pull back this string and make a clean shot. And you got more clothing on than you're probably used to shooting with.
Yep.
And so it's a huge deal.
It is a huge deal. And especially, being able to not even practice that outcome, but be able to really, I found for me, really dial in and learn that process of archery in the hunting application, because that process of shooting a bow shouldn't change from being out in my yard to being in the tree stand. That process needs to be the same.
Yeah.
And the outcome will happen.
So if we can kind of circle back around, because I do want to try to, we're kind of trying to recap the 2018 season.
That was a little side tangent.
Yeah, well, it's worthwhile though. I mean, when you start getting into ethics and practice and everything else, I think it's worthwhile to take the time to go down those bunny trails.
Yes.
So let's move to something that's really, that I guess kind of came as a shock to me.
Okay.
Was when the hunt that I actually got the buck.
Yeah.
Okay.
The buck.
So maybe I will just start kind of
walk us through that.
Detailing that. Just jump in whenever if you have questions on something specific. It was a Sunday morning, and it was unexpected that I was going to be able to go out that morning. We have church in the evenings now, so I was like, oh, cool. Usually it's a family morning, but it worked out that I could go out. It was flurries. I think there's like 2 or 3 inches on the ground, and I drove out there, got all my stuff on, and I do all my descenting stuff, whatever percentage it helps me, I'll give it a shot. And I'm walking out there, I get in stand well before light, probably an hour and a half before light, and I climb up in the tree, and man, it's just like so beautiful. It's like the snow is falling down. I got videos going on and pictures, and I'm just like, I just love it. I love being out here.
I remember that day. I was going to go out later that afternoon myself, and it was just that snow falling.
Dude, it was a nice day. It was so nice.
Yeah.
And so at this point in this season, I had gone out a couple times and just seen a couple spikes, which it's a win when you're in range of any deer, I've found. But really finding something that you're going to let an arrow fly on is pretty tough at times. So I climbed up this tree, and this is the spot that I had talked previously about missing that 8-pointer. And that was in mid to late September. So there was no scrapes or anything on the ground, just some rubs. And then the trail they came on, I guess that one did have a scrape or two, but that was out of my range where that scrape was. Okay. So anyway, I climbed up in this tree, and I'm sitting there, and there's a little bunny rabbit hopping around down by my tree, and the wind is marginal. I mean, I would only go to this spot. Okay, so I knew that was a spot from, I think it was from September until October, November. And so, it would have been November 11th I was out there. So I knew about the spot, and I maybe gone there twice. So it was probably my third time out there, because I was like, one wind is what I can hunt this on. And it was marginal. And so I went out there, and I put some Tink 69, the old Tink 69 in the boots, and I walked in on their heaviest trail. And I walked up right up to this tree where I had a camera set, and I pulled the card just because I was down there, and shimmied up my tree, hooked the card up to my phone, started looking, and nothing that great. So I was like, that kind of sucks because it's been out there for a while. And I get up there, and I'm sitting, and there's train tracks maybe 75 yards or less behind me. And I got a couple trains just rolling by. I'm starting to get where I've been out there for 3-4 hours, so the cold is starting to set in, and I'm starting to cool off. And this train probably was going for like 20 minutes, and I'm just like, man, there's going to be no deer around. I started this negative self-talk. There's not going to be any deer around here. And then after the train leaves, I'm like, dude, they're used to trains. And so I would stand up periodically, try to be on my feet most of the time when I'm out there. And I noticed something out of the corner of my eye, out of the corner of my eye over my right shoulder, and on the railroad tracks, right where I had applied the Tink 69, was a buck. Nice. Now I didn't know it was the buck, but it was a buck, and I had ranged like everything around me. After I had missed some deer, I was like, I need to know every spot that I feel like they would be. And so it was like I could just look around, and it was like up 18 yards, 19 yards, 22 yards, 15 yards, 10 yards, whatever it was, I could see it. And so he starts walking in on this trail right along the way I'd walked, and there's these two trees that are probably like 1.5 feet across. And I'd predetermined, I said, okay, he's going to step in between these two, like his head's going to get behind the first tree. I'm going to draw. And when he steps out in between those two trees is when I'm going to take him. And so he was coming down the trail, and he gets to that right where those trees are. So I start to draw. I get 3/4 of the way back, and he started like he was moseying, and all of a sudden he just walks out from behind that tree, and I'm 3/4 of the way back, and he stops. And I'm like, I have to draw the rest of the way. I'm at like the highest poundage right now. So I just pull it all the way back, and he's just like, okay, he doesn't freak out, but he turns casually. Now his whole body's behind the first tree, and he starts going up and to the right, and he offers me the exact same quartering away shot. And he kind of takes one more step where he just kind of gets a little more broadside, and I let the arrow fly. And I actually hear for the first time on a deer, I hear thwack, and the deer just drops. And so instantly I'm like, yes. And I was expecting to get like this overwhelming, like exciting feeling and like shaky.
Yeah.
The deer's not dead. And this is the first time that I'd shot a deer and felt like it was like close and personal. And it was like the first. And it should be, you could argue that I should feel this before this at this time in life, but it was the first time it was like a solemn moment where I was like, this is heavy. So I had spine shot the deer. So after all this, after everything was finished, I was up in the tree, and I ranged where I thought he was, and like what distance I thought it was, and where I was holding my pin opposed to what he actually was. It was like the one area I did not expect him to go. And so I had thought he was further away, and he was actually closer, so my arrow was higher. Had he been where I thought he was as far as distance, it would have been like back of the rib cage into the vitals. Right, and I just blew it. I blew it as far as like doing a quick ethical shot. And so I'm sitting in the stand, and you can see it. I have it on a YouTube channel, but I'm looking at the camera, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is unreal. Like I just felt like so much pity for this animal. And I felt like I had totally done this animal a disservice of like dispatching a quick, like ethical, clean kill. Because I'm sitting here watching this animal paralyzed from the back, the butt down on its front legs trying to get away. And it was not something
just sickening.
Yeah. I was, and I'm a climber, and so I'm like trying to be wise and trying to get down like at a safe pace, we'll say. And like everything in me just wanted to like literally bear hug the tree and shimmy down it real quick and grab the bow and just go over there and put another arrow in it. And so I had done it as safely as I could. I had gotten down, I grabbed my bow, I grabbed another arrow, and I got right broadside of the deer. And I let another one fly, and it hit where I was aiming for this time. Just probably 15 yards or so. And it took me 2 days, I think, before I could get excited. It took me 2 days before I was like, yeah, like I'm excited about getting this deer, because I was like, I felt like I had actually like failed the animal. And I know that this can feel almost like mushy or like I'm overplaying it, but this is just what I was actually feeling. And I was as surprised as anybody who might not expect me to feel that, because I'm used to like rifle hunting. And when you're rifle hunting and you have a group of people, you get a deer on a deer drive, it's like, woo, yeah, this is the sickest thing we've ever done. Woo! Like this, it's this group mentality where everybody's like super into it and excited, and you're celebrating with each other right away. So there's not that time where it's like you and this animal. And it's all like high intensity. where it was like the most peaceful moment. And then it went from like, okay, now a deer is half paralyzed and it's like trying to get away, whatever it can do. And like, so for me, it was really tough.
Dude, I remember getting a text from you.
Man,
it was the first text was, I got a deer. And then it was followed up with, but I spine shot it.
Yeah.
Like, you didn't have to tell me that. You didn't have to tell anybody that.
Yeah.
But I think that was it just goes back to the thing that we've bonded so well over was not shying away from the reality of our hunts. However good, bad, or ugly they are.
Yep.
It is what it is. And,
yeah.
and there's things we can learn from it, but not shying away from that. And that was just like, I remember getting that and it was just like, ooh, that sucks. Because I knew what you felt, like how bad you felt for leaving that deer. Not leaving it, but having spine shotted it at first and not being able to just quickly put it out.
Yeah, and I think this is what I probably hit me the most after some time had passed was, okay, the highlight of every show you watch, everything, and I'm just as guilty as anybody else, like watching these, like, it's like, okay, let's get to the part where you are successful. Mm-hmm. But when you're the person actually doing the killing and you are up close and personal, it's like, it's not, for me, it was not the pinnacle I was expecting it to be. Mm-hmm. But then, like, the community around that actually started to surpass the actual killing of this deer. And so there's two things, really. It was, like, the actual meat that was provided and, like, the meals and, like, the connection to, hey, this meal, like, I took this from an animal, outdoors, like, put in the time and the energy and the effort. And I went and I completed this pursuit, which is what I get excited about, is, like, the pursuit and overcoming challenges and, like, all that time I put in paid off. That's what I'm excited about. But the killing part of it, which I think a lot of people think is like the high, for me, that was actually probably one of the lowest moments next to some clean misses probably.
Yeah. And
it was like, oh, that was unexpected. And pretty soon it became, when my family, like my my 3 boys or 2 boys, depending on how many we brought out there, honestly. But we had brought out my two older boys, and we had a little baby at the time. We had brought out my 2 older boys, 4 and 2. We had walked way out there, and then to share that with them, as far as like we had them do a quote unquote track job. I mean, the deer was like 10, 15 yards from where I'd shot it, just because it was of the shot of where the shot placement was. But to share that, like, that starts to become the pinnacle. Sharing that with my family and them being willing to, like, just bust tail to get out there, because it was a long, cold walk. And I feel a little bit selfish in it, because I know it means probably a lot more to me than it means to them. Yeah. And then again, coming back to the community, I was able to have people, like, kind of rally around me, like, yeah, everybody has shots that don't go where they expect it to. Everybody has shots where it's this, and this. Not to say that's okay, but to say that
it's reality.
It's the reality of the hunt. It's not, everything's not the, right in the old ticker.
Yep.
And so,
but yet though, how much did you, in a sense, have to battle because of this perceived image that is given off by so much of the hunting community and culture and media? Whereas we see these TV shows where they release an arrow and they hit the deer, and the next thing we see a dead deer. Yep. And we think, like, they're successful all the time, and, like, we never see these failures and these misses, and all we see is these success. I mean, I remember the first time ever watching a video on somebody openly admitting to missing and then wounding a deer was Donnie Vincent in the Rivers Divide film, where he missed the deer at 17 yards. Yeah. And then later he wounds that deer. Yeah. And then that was mind blowing at the time to see somebody, a very high prolific community figure within the hunting community, openly admit to that. Yeah. Like that, because that just, it seemed like such a rarity. Yeah. And then how much that affects I've realized over the last few years how much that has affected me.
Yeah.
Coming into even hunting without having grown up hunting,
Mm-hmm.
like there's this expectation. You get a big animal,
Yep.
and you get it right away. Like
Yep.
you don't miss, and
Yeah.
if you do miss, you're a bad hunter.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so for me to attempt to answer your question here, so 27 years up to this point was the stereotypical, like you're saying, may or may not be high fence operation, whatever it is, but monster buck. You go out there, it's condensed into 21 minutes because you got ads with it. You know what I mean? Like, and then everywhere you could shove in a product that you were using, it happened type of thing. It was like, oh, okay, so that's what success looks like. So I started out talking with Seth, right? And we were talking about just general tactics and stuff. And so that didn't have too much of an impact on like still what success was. Mm-hmm. And so then he kind of pointed me towards the hunting public and their strategies. And so generally when I go to a new YouTube channel, I go to their videos and I arrange it from the highest watched to figure out if I'm interested in what their most popular stuff is. And of course it's them successfully going out on these hunts.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh man, but like during that process of them actually being successful, I saw a lot of tactics and that paid off. And I was like, oh, this is great. This is awesome. Still hasn't quite changed my perception of what success is. Mm-hmm. And after I was sold on them, I was like, okay, well, what's the rest of their hunting videos about? And I started watching and I realized that 85% of their videos are them, quote unquote, not succeeding. Mm-hmm. Having a lot of close encounters, willing to risk things to learn. And I was like, oh. So that to me started to become like, it's a success when you go out there, you bump a buck. Well, now you know. Mm-hmm. Now you know something. Now you know a little bit more about that area. That's not what you intended to do. But like I went out and I bumped a big buck. Well, I continued on. I didn't go, oh, this whole area is blown. I got to leave. Yeah. I continued to go. I set up my stand. I saw a 4-pointer, the 8-pointer that I missed. And then on my way out, I saw a 4-pointer. And so I saw 4 bucks on one outing on an area I've never been to. And it was like, oh, okay. That feels successful to me. And then I think the next thing was boundaries. And this is the part, I think, when we get into the ugly is like you're talking about is this is what success looks like. Okay, so if I want to share this with somebody and I'm feeling that this is unsuccessful, how and who do I talk to? You know, who's interested in my quote unquote failures? Mm-hmm. Well, when I started thinking about boundaries and goals, one of the boundaries that I had to make in my mind was I'm not out here to kill a 12-point buck my first year. And Seth did help me along with that. He's like, dude, you can't expect the first time you're out there. He's like, you'll see guys that will maybe have what they call a once-in-a-lifetime buck. Well, the reason it's once in a lifetime is because their methods aren't working year to year. Where if you can consistently get a deer, your methods are working. But it takes a lot to get there. Where you can start to be semi-consistent with year-to-year success on big, smart animals. Yeah. And so that's where just as far as my goals went and my boundaries, I was like, you know what? And I'd mentioned a few times already, but the deer has to be something in the moment that I'm excited enough about to be willing to give up the rest of my season. Yeah. And so that was my boundaries, and I set it there. Did I still struggle with like having to tell people I missed, and people being like, well, what? Like, how bad are you at this whole thing? I mean, that's the majority of the people I talk to. Yeah. But then that community where it's like people really care about the nuances and stuff, and they're able to help you understand the lessons and the positive in it. That's where that really came through for me. Nice. And so without that, it's like, who knows how long I would go on? Yeah. You know, so it's hard to struggle with what the world sees as failures outside of having a community that's supporting you. Yeah. And helping you kind of really get a good grasp on what's going on.
So that community is so vital to helping the longevity of this all and being able to learn, mm-hmm. especially as newbies. Yeah. You know, newbies that didn't have necessarily direct community that was right there. Yeah. That somebody other people might have.
Yeah.
You know, and that's really what we bonded over was this couple of newbies.
Yep.
And then we still are.
Yeah, absolutely.
Learning how this all
Yeah.
works out and everything that we can learn from it.
Yeah. You know, I think for me, after that last arrow that actually took the animal, the thing that I'm walking away with, I think, and then I took from it, and who knows if I would have felt this otherwise. It'd be kind of far-fetched for me to really believe that I'd be like, yeah, that was still good, even though you didn't get anything this year. I think the biggest thing is not letting an arrow and where it lands determine your entire season and how you feel about your season. And really to slow down and to take in the entire process of what you're doing. Because in hindsight, while I absolutely am like ecstatic about the meet, and I'm ecstatic that there was some level of success, you know, maybe in the world's eyes.
Yeah.
What I'm most excited about is the friends and the connections I've made through the hunting community. And then also being able to like reap the harvest of this animal, and then also be able to share that with like people who maybe don't even hunt.
Yeah.
And so, you know, if I go into next year as successful as I might want to be, my goal is really to take in the entire process, because that's what made up this season. Even though I thought the buck was going to be the pinnacle, it was and it wasn't. You know, it's hard to put words to it, but it was and it wasn't. It taught a lot of good lessons, and there was a lot of good, bad, and ugly. But overall, I mean, it was a formative year.
Yeah. So would you say that it really kind of went into 2018 into this whole archery hunting for deer with a very outcome based outlook? Like, I'm going to get a deer and it's going to look like X, Y, or Z. And then you came away with really more focused on the process and what you were learning and have learned through that. So really going from an outcome-based outlook to a performance-based outlook on this whole adventure.
Yeah, I think that there's definitely parts of it that match up exactly with what you're saying. But I think like even more than that, you know, because I was like, oh, I'll take a doe. You know, like that would be really cool if I took a doe, and if I see a buck that I'm excited enough, I'll take it. And if I'm not, then I'm not.
Yeah.
But I'm like, I should be, you know, the guilty part of me, honestly, was if I didn't get a doe and I didn't get a buck, that would have I really would have been like, well, I expected to get a doe at some point.
Yeah.
That's supposed to be the easy part. I think I saw more bucks than I saw does this year, as far as the areas I was going to. You know, little bucks, don't mind you, but little bucks become big bucks over time. So I would say definitely the outcome based was a big part of it, but just also like there was a reality check in my mind early on where, and this is again where the community comes in. It was like, dude, you cannot go out there and expect, you know, you might get lucky, sure, but you can't go out there and expect to like, hey, my first year out, I'm going to just thwack this huge buck.
Yeah.
My brother had kind of helped set some of those ideas in motion where it's like, just if nothing else, take this year as a scouting year. Be willing to move. Don't get married to one spot, which is a totally new concept to me, because deer season, every single day, it is sit in this stand after you put some corn out, you know, which is fine in itself. But as far as like really being engaged with what's going on and just figuring out their movements on, you know, just on their own process and you not tampering with that, it was just sit there in the morning, go do deer drives, sit there in the evening for 9 days. And so for me not to get married to one spot, that was like, and carry that stand and carry your backpack and go where you don't know what it actually looks like yet besides from e-scouting.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it did help me kind of set some sort of standard in my mind where I was like, okay, not everything's going to be outcome based, because it is a long-term game I'm playing here. But outside of community, I definitely would have went in being like, I need to kill a huge animal.
Yeah.
Because that's where my mind was for rifle season. That's what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to go out and be able to shoot this huge buck.
Yeah.
And that never happened.
That's what that's I think the expectation that so many of us have.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, man, I don't know. Anything else that you have to add to that that you didn't get to touch upon?
Man, I guess, if I can, I'll just recap real quick on some of the good, the bad, and the ugly. The good things that came out of it were my family, like especially my boys, being able to just see them engage with nature in a way that they haven't been able to, or hasn't been an outlet yet. Of course, they're just kind of becoming of age where I'm bringing them out there with me.
Yeah.
I even set up a trail camera where you could see maybe 10 feet, but my son looks at me and he goes, "Dad, this is the perfect tree." And I'm like, I can't say no. And so I put it on there for 2 weeks, and, I got a couple does walking by, but just to see his excitement, like that in itself was like, that is probably one of the more powerful and exciting things of the season. I would say just interacting with nature, allowing it to be revitalizing, and really consciously fighting the failures that can demotivate you really quickly. And when you go out and you bump a deer, or you go out and you miss a shot, and all of a sudden you're looking at your time as a total waste, like you're taking so much away from yourself. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so really making sure that you're taking in the entire process and understanding that it's going to be a learning curve. It's going to take time. Everybody misses. Everybody fails. But it's only a real fail if you're not willing to learn and move on.
Exactly.
Right? Some of the bad stuff, though, at the same time, is you have time away from family, whether it's practice, scouting, or hunting. You're trying to balance all those things, especially starting for me in August, like right before the season. It was like every time I could get out, I wanted to get out, but also that takes a toll on the family, And so that was tough. And another big thing for me was stuff. It was really hard to be content because I really wanted to have the best stuff. I always love having the best stuff. And the reality is it doesn't take the best stuff. 30, 40, 50 years ago, whatever it is, they're wearing flannels and jeans.
Oh, yeah.
And they're out there killing
more
it,
things
pun intended,
than we probably ever will.
Exactly. And just trying to be more content with what I have, and understanding that it takes time to accumulate things, and just not to rush that either, because you do get a better appreciation for when you get to upgrade.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then the other bad thing I'd say is long shots. I experienced things where it was like I missed the deer. I would practice more, but also I could feel myself questioning whether or not I should take a shot. And so, thankfully, I didn't shoot one much further than I thought I could.
Yep.
Even though I'd missed some of those longer ones, I didn't feel like I was compromising, even though I just didn't have a good process yet. I didn't have a good foundation with archery. Of course, the ugly is just missed animals. I got about as lucky as you can be. I think total of 3 deer I missed. Jeez. Yeah, 3 deer I missed, all clean misses. So I'm that bad and that good at the same time. So it was great. Self-doubt, that was something I worked through quite a bit through this year. I feel a lot more confident going into next year. But that's something where you have to understand that when you go out there, no matter what, you have to go in your mind and say, I'm going to learn something valuable, whether or not I see an animal.
Yeah.
And so if you get out there and there's no sign, well, you learn something about that area.
Yeah.
Right? And then last, but certainly not least, caring about what others think. And it's okay to care what people think, but to let it dictate how you hunt and what you're willing to do to be quote unquote successful. You got to set boundaries and goals in your mind that are important to you and you alone, or maybe to you and a partner, where you're just not quite willing to cross that line.
Yeah.
I was literally within feet of some fork bucks that I could have hit and then been like, see, I can do it. I'm showing you I can do it.
Yeah.
But it was like it wasn't enough for me as far on a personal level.
Yeah.
And so it felt really good passing those up, and it was a kind of a bummer coming home and it's like showing them videos of them just being feet away, but then at the same time it's like, well, why don't you kill one? It's like, well, it's a fine balance, but just really making sure that you set your own goals and boundaries on stuff. That's and really sticking to them. because there's so many things that can happen in the season, and you can make some emotional decisions. So early on, just try to figure that stuff out. And yeah, I guess that's it for me.
Nice.
Yeah, I can't wait to dig in a little bit deeper into your 3 seasons and how that evolves, and seeing what kind of hunter you've become and archer you've become. So yeah, man, I look forward to it.
Yeah, I think we'll save that here for episode 3.
All right, man.
So Ethan, where can we be found?
We can be found at Venator Chronicles on Instagram, iTunes, and Facebook.
We're iTunes official.
Yeah, we're iTunes. We
just
feel,
sounds really cool.
Man, we feel way cooler than we should about that. But early on, it's okay.
Just a couple guys dorking out about being on iTunes.
On a bunch of used stuff. Yeah. Anyway, so we can be found there. And then, as you guys probably saw early on, Podbean is also an option for you if you're not running Apple. So you can check that out. We'd love to hear any feedback, positive, negative, anything. If you guys would like us, share, rate us, positive or negative. We want to hear what you're thinking. We want you to really be able to engage in the community. I'd say one of the most positive things I heard from the last episode that we had was someone mentioned that they were going to possibly dust off Dad's old bow and start getting into it. So to me, I was like, that's why we're here. That's why we're here.
That's cool.
And so, I hope something comes from that. And, I hope you guys enjoyed.
All right. Till next time.
Thanks for joining us. Have
Later.
a good one. Bye.